Hello and welcome. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm here with my good friend Monique. Welcome to the show, Monique. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Garrett. Thank you for having me on the show.
I am so excited to have her on the show, guys. She's an expert communication. So, we communicate every single day. So I'm really looking forward to really just picking your brain and giving our audience some value.
It is my pleasure.
So for our audience, Monique is the communications expert you want on your team. She teaches women leaders and teams how to have positive and productive relationships at home and at work, using effective communication tools and strategies. She is passionate about serving Black and women employee research groups, organizations like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, just to name a few. Trust Monique to guide them in implementing communication strategies that foster connection, community, creativity, and courage. Monique has 20 years of experience in the science of communication and leads Clear Communication Solutions, an international training, coaching, and consulting firm that focuses on confidently communicating from the inside out. She's the author of The Ultimate Speaker's Guide and the book, Intentional Motherhood, Who Said It Would Be Easy. And she's also the host of the Bridge to You podcast. Wow, I love that. Before we dive in, I do want to mention her book, Intentional Motherhood. When I first read this, I maybe this is geared towards women, but I started to read it, it's like, oh, this looks super interesting. I know it says motherhood on it, but for all the fellas out there, you should definitely read it. I definitely connected with it and learned a lot from it, and I feel like you will too. So, great book, Monique, and I'm really looking forward to these next few minutes.
Thank you, Garrett. And just to let you know, you're not alone. There are a lot of men who have read the book and loved it, just like you. So thank you for reading, sharing, and letting your community know about the resource.
It's interesting, like when we see like a book for like another gender, we always think, oh, we're not gonna like it, but it turns out like, oh, there's some really good stuff we can still learn in it. So.
Oh yeah. And you know in the book that there's a whole chapter on it's not about age and it's not even about a biology. It's about identity, how we choose to see ourselves. So motherhood is not something that is limited or limits us to age or biology. It's the act of nurturing. So
there's a list of it, guys. What's your definition of leadership?
Wow. Leadership to me is being able to develop yourself to optimum potential, because so much of what we do as leaders requires that we have a deep understanding and self-awareness of who we are, how we operate, how we navigate, how our past experiences influence the way we relate to and connect with others, and also how we manage our emotions. So to me, the whole premise and aspect of leadership, the bedrock is communication, and that communication starts with self before it moves to others.
Wow, that was great. I really like how you mentioned potential. I know like many organizations, the ones that I know I've been a part of, they don't really like focus on that. They always focus on like what they see in front of them, but they don't really understand like, there's a lot more to us if you know how to use this correctly. But they don't understand that, so they kind of like do everything cut and dry. It's like, oh.
Yeah, and they do it from the reverse, from the outside in, as opposed to the inside out. So most of what we have been taught or what we've learned about leadership is about getting people to do what they should do or to follow or to listen. A lot of the dictator style or micromanagement style behavior is what we equate to, or what we have equated to leadership. But in my mind, it's not really something that is equated to those behaviors, because you really have to be able to have people do the work for you, follow you, respect you, and appreciate you. And the only way to do that is to do that to them first.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, like a lot of people like expect the team members to like build a relationship with the leader, but it should be like the other way around. It's like they're following you. You need to like show it up front first.
I mean, it's just the hierarchy that we have in society. I mean, that's just the honest truth, right? There's no getting around that. That, the higher you are, the more the title that you have, the more influence and respect and admiration that you have, because you have that title. And you see it and you hear it with a lot of people who aspire to be a CEO, or aspire to be in that C-suite, or they are aspiring to have that promotion. I mean, you can go on Google and you get a search about how to get a promotion. I mean, the results are astronomical. And so people are always striving for that higher role because they feel it gives them more influence and more impact. Some people, they don't really care about leading people. They just want the money. They don't really want the promotion. They just want the money. So with that, I say, guess what? You can find that money that you're looking for outside of your job. What if you were to find something that you enjoyed, that you could manage, you could control outside of your job, and you can get that extra uh, money or investment that you're looking for, instead of pushing for this political position in a corporate role? Why don't you look for that? And that's for those who, at the core, if they aren't aware of why they want that promotion, then we peel that onion back and we find out what's really driving the desire. And if it's really just money, you can find that outside.
I like how you mentioned that to peel that onion. I know, like, I feel like a lot of people don't do that during interviews. Like, I feel like a lot of people like would look pretty much at the resume and just ask some generic questions. So I noticed that in my own interviews, like they ask like some generic ones where you don't really get to like understand the deep core of like what you're trying to find. If that makes sense. It's like, huh,
Yeah. I
interesting.
mean, go ahead, Garrett.
No, no, I'm not gonna say anything.
No, I mean, the thing is, well, there's two parts. So you can only get so much out of an interview. And then there are the standard procedures that people have to follow and they need to ask. And I feel like in that hiring process, there are some broken pieces, because no one's really taken the time to understand who it is that they're hiring on the other side. And they're just going through that checklist. I remember when I was in the market and I was looking for an opportunity, I mean, there was so many different things that came into play. People become intimidated by those that they are interviewing. And there's data and research and science that proves that people tend to hire those that they feel are a little bit below them, so they don't feel as though they are threatened. So we can't really get so much out of an interview. We can't expect them to be able to give all the culture. It's like dating. You're gonna learn about the other person after a couple of months.
Mhm.
So, and even then you're still figuring each other out. So you just have to be realistic and be honest that you're not going to get everything out of an interview, but you do your best to be prepared, to make sure that you know what cues and clues to look for. Do your research, though, to the best of your ability, and then pursue that opportunity.
Of that. I know earlier we talked about some leadership mistakes. Would you say there are some other common ones you see in your practice?
Yes, there are a lot. There are a lot. But first, I want to say, leaders, people who are responsible for leading other people, we definitely got to give them some grace and give them some compassion, because it's not easy. People are complex and they have all these different ways of seeing things and perspectives and cultures. And then you, as the leader, you have to be able to manage and navigate all of those relationships as well. So, one of the biggest challenges that I see with leaders is not taking time to understand the dynamics of relationships. How do they form? How does respect form? How can I build that? Like, when should I be um, silent and when should I give feedback? A big challenge for leaders is feedback. How do I give it in a way that I don't feel like I'm being condescending or I'm being, like punitive? Or most of them, they ignore it and they don't give any feedback until their performance review time. So that's a big, big, big challenge for a lot. And it's in the bedrock of communication, because if you're developing that skill, you're actually setting aside time and you're building in that cadence so that you can actually have an honest conversation. And it's a two-way conversation as opposed to a one-way conversation. And then another big thing is delegation. Wow, that's a huge challenge. Because people are afraid to delegate. They don't want to let go. They want to micromanage. They feel like it'll take me longer to teach someone or release someone to do it than me doing it myself. So they pull all the tasks and then they feel overwhelmed and they're like, I don't have a good team. It's so hard to find good people. And they struggle with that releasing, or they release it, it's not done well, and so they take it back, not realizing that that's a great time for feedback and growth and setting up that cadence. So the delegation portion is very much tied to emotional intelligence and how we feel about letting go or having control or having a difficult conversation. So that's a big one. And then I would say the third biggest one is really around taking care of self. Burnout is a big thing. Self-care is a big thing. And a lot of times we're struggling. We're struggling as leaders, and everybody around us knows it. But we pretend that we have it all under control, and everyone can see that we don't. And so that whole aspect of balancing our self-care, being honest to say, you know what, I don't know. I know I'm in charge of this, but I don't even understand what it is that's going on, or I need help. Those are things that can help to alleviate us from feeling overwhelmed and feeling very anxious. And it just makes us better leaders because we can't do it all. We release things and give other people opportunities to shine. And that's what builds a really effective team.
I like that. I like how you talk about feedback. It's always a struggle for many people too. I think how you have it too. Because it's not always like the easiest because we're afraid of like hurting them, their feelings emotionally and professionally. What are some ways to give feedback when it may not be the best? It won't be the most positive feedback information that you have to give them.
So I would say this. You want to build a habit or a relationship. Well, let me do this. Let me say this. If you think about somebody in your life, and can be personally or professionally, think about somebody in your life who you can say, I know they will be honest with me. They're gonna tell me the truth. They're gonna tell me if I'm messing up, if I'm doing some foolishness, and I will receive it from them. I can receive it. Why can I receive it from this person? Got that person in mind? Why? Why can you receive it from that person?
Was that a question or was that a
I'm
rhetorical
asking
question?
you. I want you to think about that person. Like who do you know that they can give you honest feedback that may not be the best, that may hurt your feelings a little bit, but you will receive it and you won't feel uncomfortable?
I'd say I think my siblings, depending, and then I know one of my nursing friends.
Yeah, and so why would you be able to receive that from them?
I
What's
know with
what's
my
so
nursing
special
friend.
about them that you'll be able to receive it?
I know with my nursing friend. He explicitly says like, "I'm going to tell you what you don't want to hear, but you need to hear." And then my siblings, I just know they just would tell me.
Yeah, but why would you receive that from them without feeling upset or wanting revenge or feeling like they're just trying to hate on you?
I say the expectation that it's coming regardless if I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. And also because you respect them and because they respect you and you know that they have your best interests at heart. A lot of times when we are in leadership roles and it's difficult for us to give or receive feedback, it's because that part of trust and relationship building hasn't been built. So if the only time we're getting feedback is because something is wrong or they're giving us something we need to hear, but we don't want to hear, they have not earned the right to do that. And so we don't receive that with grace. We don't receive it. We dismiss it. We say, you know what? Who you think you is? What? I don't want to hear that. Like, But if they have given us positive feedback, if we know that they have done small things to show that they actually care, we receive criticism and critical feedback from people we know genuinely care. And so we're able to receive that better. So my suggestion to those who are struggling with critical feedback is to ask yourself, when was the last time I gave this person positive feedback? Have I actually earned the right to give this feedback? And I'm not talking about earn the right because you have a title. Have I earned the right? Have I built the trust? Do I have more deposits than withdrawals? Because when we're hearing negative feedback, our brains tend to cling to that and latch on to that anyway. So have I given enough positive deposits before I'm making withdrawals? Or is it the only time that I'm hearing from them is because there's something wrong? When my youngest son was in elementary school, I had a situation like that where his teacher would always email, call, or text when he wasn't behaving well. And to the point where I would go to work, and if I saw her name popped up in the email, I'd be, oh, you know what? I'm not even opening the email. You know what? It's 11 o'clock. I just sat down to this desk not too long ago. We got until 3 o'clock until school comes out. I'm not even opening the email. Because every single time I heard from her, it was only something negative. And granted, teachers don't really have the time to send you an email when they have 30 kids in the class to say, oh, your son did great today, or, whatever have you. But for me, there was one time where I lost it. And I was like, please do not send me any more emails about my son until you start sending me positive emails, because you may not realize it, but this is starting to have a negative impact on our relationship. So you got to earn the right.
That's interesting. I like that. As you were talking, I was like, wow, that's interesting. So a lot of organizations do have that problem that they're bad at. Organizations don't have haven't built that relationship. That's interesting.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think so too. I noticed it too, and you actually show that you want to be there for them rather than just the role. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, the same thing with your friends. These are principles that are timeless, and they are location neutral. So it doesn't just happen in your workplace. It can happen in your personal relationships with your families, or even in your social relationships with your friends. If you have a friend who always is talking about what you're doing wrong and this and that, it's like, come on, you just jealous. You're just jealous. Like, you want to be like me. That's what people will think. Whereas you can have a friend who's very honest with you and you receive it, and they could actually tell it to you in a way that doesn't protect your emotions, and you can receive it because you know that person genuinely cares for you because they've been there. So again, it's not the textbook approach. It's not an easy 1, 2, 3 checklist. Relationship building really can't be automated. It can't be automated or so transactional. So it's very relational.
Have you noticed any other communication mistakes that people make?
In which context?
Still workplace, since most people will have a lot of conflict in the workplace regarding communication.
So, for the leaders, the ones that I mentioned to you, but in general, just a lack of awareness of what makes a team cohesive, um, a lack of awareness of how we communicate as individuals. I think the more we become aware of how we communicate, our communication styles, our conflict styles, and we're able to manage our energy, then the easier it is for us to get along with others at work. We just simply haven't taken the time to dive deep into that, and we don't have a lasting accountability and lasting programs. You see people come in, they do 1 day training. I mean, really 1 day training, and they expect that to last for a whole year. So a big mistake is really not having that understanding or the awareness of how teams work and function, how communication styles influence how we relate to each other, and then also, just how conflict, what is our typical conflict style? We can take this and we can look at, and that's a part of what I wrote also in my book, in terms of those styles of leadership, the styles of leadership that were important to us, or exposed, not important, but exposed to us in our younger years. We tend to take those same styles of communication subconsciously into our workplace environments. So if in our home life, conflict happened and we saw people withdrawing, or we have the silent treatment, we'll see a lot of that happening in the workplace, a withdrawal, a silent treatment, or if someone just gets irate or self-sabotage, um, or extreme micromanagement. All of those are responses to lack of awareness of how our communication influences and patterns show up where we are as adults in our work.
Yeah, I agree too. I know it's definitely transferred. I can definitely see that in the family setting too. Like communication transfers from one family member from a young age to the other. Definitely seen ours too. I mean, no family's perfect, but you know, I'm glad that me and my siblings have understood that, and we've done a pretty good job of fixing it.
That's great.
I know in your book, you talk about how you broke away from cycles in life that were difficult, such as lack, dominance, and abuse. What mindset shifts did you make early in that journey to help you really get to where you are today?
Well, the good thing about it is a lot of what I teach is what I have been through, right?
Mhm.
So I am teaching from my experience, and I'm teaching from my professional experiences as well. And I tell people I had so much academic training, in the science of communications, my undergrad, my two of my graduate programs, different certifications, all of this knowledge,
Mhm.
and none of it was sufficient for me to actually get to the core of who I was. It wasn't until I really started in coaching, receiving coaching, I should say, and being exposed. So there was a group of women aspiring together to succeed. That's the group called Watts. It was ran by a lady named Donna Satchel and Linda Shorter. I got exposed to that group in 2007, 2008. And it was life changing. And so this is how I know. There's a quote that says, the mind once exposed or once stretched cannot return to its original state. So it's like you have a rubber band and you stretch that rubber band all the way out, and then you're trying to get it back to that original elasticity. You can't do it. And it's the same thing with your mind. If you become exposed to opportunities and the potential of what you can achieve in your life, that's always going to be an imprint in your mind. So for me, I began to be exposed to different groups, people who were much older than I was. And I was listening to what they were talking about, listening to what they were reading. and doing vision boards. That was the first time that I did a vision board in a visual way.
Mhm.
Always set goals, but tapping into the creative elements with pictures and music and all of that stuff. That was the very first time that I had actually set goals that way. So my mindset shifts was from um, exposure to new communities, new ways of looking at life, getting into coaching, looking at positive programming on TV. When I was younger, I didn't have much freedom and leeway to watch anything and everything. I had 2 shows a week that I could watch. And I used to watch The Cosby Show. And it was something that I loved. And it gave me even though it was fictitious, it gave me a positive image of family life and what could be possible. So it was those imprints. And I think that's why it's also important to be very, very careful about what we allow into our mind and our ears, the music we watch, the things we pay attention to, who we're following on social media, because we're imprinting and imprinting and imprinting and imprinting every single time through our senses, right?
Mhm.
So for me, the shift became something that, because of those exposures, I was able to begin to see myself differently and affirm the beliefs that I had that were healthy and positive for me.
I thought you mentioned the rubber band. That's very visual. That's a good, pretty good analogy. You just keep expanding it, but you never go back. So I like that. And putting yourself in the right positions. It's funny, like most people, like for a lot of people thinking like the opposite, it's gonna come if I need they need something to give them the right mindset, but it's really how you position yourself. And it makes a difference. I mean, you don't really feel it in the beginning, but like over time it's like, wow, it's a good thing I did that.
But let me just say this, sometimes you don't know. Because when the reason I got connected to that group was because there was a bookstore called the Shrine of the Black Madonna that my mom and I, we saw, we heard, we were driving, and we're like, oh, let's stop in here. We did not have an intention. So we stopped and let's check out what's going on in here. And while we were in there, in the room adjacent to the bookstore, there were these 2 ladies who were getting ready to give a workshop. And one poked her head and she said, hey, um, why don't you come on in here inside a workshop? And I looked at my mom, and we didn't really have anything to do after that. I think we had just come from a nutritional conference. That's right, Dr. Scott Whitaker. And we were just hanging around. And I was like, you want to go? She's like, okay. And we sat in there and we got exposed to these women. And then from there, I was like, oh, I'm signing up. So I don't want anybody to think that, okay, this was so strategic and Monique had it written down to a science. No, yes, it came through me exploring and curiosity and going into that bookstore and saying yes, being open to what was presented to me. But I did not know when I started that day that that's one of the communities I would be exposed to.
It's funny how you mentioned curiosity and really opening yourself to different experiences. Sometimes the things that you need are like in some other route that you don't think it would normally be there. And it's interesting to
Yeah.
see like different perspectives. Because I like to like do the same thing, but like different parts of my life. Because I get I get coached in acting, but I have no desire to be an actor. But it's so interesting to see their perspective, how they perceive characters, stories, how they behave, how they communicate. It's very interesting. I think it's definitely helped me too. So it's like, oh wow, it's a different way of learning, but it sharpens what the main goal is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you could get into acting, you're a winner because you have to transform your body. You have to get in touch with a different character, a different mindset, and relate to that other person from that character space. It's great.
It's hard, but it's great. Yeah,
It's
definitely
great.
right. Many times in the workplace, there's always those domineering, very micromanagers, and they can be very strong as a team member, or maybe if you're a supervisor, maybe your boss is very domineering. How do you deal with those kinds of instances?
So first, let's understand, why is that behavior happening? And that behavior, as many other behaviors, is happening because when we are in stress, when we're under stress, the things that make us successful can also make us unsuccessful. So the domineering pattern or the aggressive behaviors typically comes out when someone is under stress, or they're not managing their personality in an effective way. And so the only thing that I can suggest is to keep the mindset that you're not at work to be everybody's friend. Everybody's not going to like you. And so take that out of your mind. Focus on the people that are connecting with you. Limit your time, especially if it becomes something that is abusive and it's a toxic setting, and you've used your voice and you've expressed the way you feel, and you've set your boundaries in terms of how you will engage and how you won't engage. You can choose that. Everything is a choice. Everything is a choice. And so once you've established your boundaries and you've established how you're going to engage, limit yourself from those situations and those interactions that may create tension and stress for you. You can't change anyone. The only person you can change is yourself. If you think you're going to change somebody, good luck. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck. But the truth is, there are a lot of pressures in the workplace. There are a lot of, it's like a cooking pot. Everything's boiling sometimes, especially if you don't have a leader who is self-aware or who has taken the time to really hone in and make his or her team healthy and effective. So limit your time, use your boundaries, and connect with those that are wanting to connect with you.
That's interesting. I like how you mentioned boundaries. So in those situations, so would you go up to let's say your dominating boss was like super rude to you, and say you're in a good space to talk to him? Would you say something like, "Hi, so and so"? I'm just gonna summarize it, not gonna like verbatim say what I would say, but like just say something along the lines of like, there lost communication when we were talking. I felt hurt by XYZ because of XYZ, and then let him talk.
Well, that's one way. That's one approach. What I really avoid is general statements, because they don't really do the context justice, right? They don't do the context justice. We can do that. I mean, we can go on Google and Google statements, and you can choose any one of 20, and none of them can work. If the context isn't correct, right? If we're lacking context, they're just phrases, right? So, I mean, I would always say, look at the context and look at the timing and pay attention to the individual. What motivates them? When would it be appropriate to have this conversation? And what do they need to hear? Sometimes it may not even need to come from you. Maybe it may need to come from someone that person respects and holds influence. And maybe you are able to utilize that person to talk to the domineering, rude boss to say, you really messed up there. You should give an apology. You have to think about multiple ways to get to the goal. And there are always multiple ways to get to the goal. If you take one single-sided approach, you may be frustrated. You might lose. Let's say your manager is someone who you can talk to. Maybe you don't need to talk to them at that same location. Maybe you change the location of where the incident happened, so you start on neutral ground. And you say, you may not realize this. Always assume positive intent. Because 9 times out of 10, when you ask somebody if they are self-aware, they're going to say, I'm very self-aware. There's research on that. Like, I'm emotionally intelligent. I'm very, very aware.
I've heard that a lot.
That's usually a red flag. Sometimes it's a red flag, because we have blind spots and we can't see them. So I would say assume positive intent. did you realize this? Or you know what, Garrett, you may not realize that when you cut me off during that conversation, we missed an opportunity to talk about the impact of making that negative choice, right? What's the impact of what happened, right? And then if it is something specific to you, you may not realize it, but when you cut me off when I'm talking in mid-sentence, it makes it difficult for me to listen to anything else you have to say. You know? So what is the impact of that feeling? Well, I felt hurt. Okay. You felt hurt. Okay. And what? Some people don't care. You felt hurt. Like, what's the impact of that? Well, now I don't even want to work for you. Now I don't even want to be a part of that team. Now I don't want to share my brilliant ideas. Now I don't want to even point out that you're going down a path that can actually make work more difficult for you. Right?
That was really good. I like that.
Thank you, Garrett.
I know you talked about emotional intelligence earlier. What do you do to improve your emotional intelligence? I'm kind of curious.
So the emotional intelligence includes self-awareness, which is understanding myself, right? That's one part. And so what I do is I journal. I journal so I can reflect on my thoughts. I get input from others around me to see how I'm coming across, get feedback from them. I have filtering questions that I use to make decisions. That's a part of emotional intelligence. And I pay attention to my body, like managing my energy. Sometimes I don't do what I should. I can easily push. Because I have a history of workaholics in my family. It's in my DNA, and I can just go, go, go. So I put boundaries in place for myself, and I put accountability partners. Everybody in the house knows that it's something that I could possibly struggle with. So if I'm still working after a certain time, and they're going to come in the office and be like, hey, you still working? Like, I thought you said you weren't going to do this anymore. So I utilize a lot of different things to help me to stay in that place of awareness. And when it comes to connecting with others, because I do that for myself, it makes it easier for me to be more understanding and to have more compassion for others too. So those are just a few things. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of joy off a lot of people, but I never thought in the context of emotional intelligence. That's interesting because I know people usually journal just to like reflect. But that's interesting that you mentioned that.
That's a critical part of it. Reflection is awareness. That's what the whole reflection part is. It's all about awareness.
Good point. Touche. I know in the workplace or wherever, communication always has some kind of conflict, whether we like it or not. What are some ways to de-escalate a conversation?
So again, I will say, look at timing, look at the location, look at the context. Sometimes you may not need to address something right there in the middle of everybody in the heat of the moment. You may need to change the location, change your language, enlist others, have others present. Those are the best ways to de-escalate. And if you find yourself, with anger or tension rising within you, to pay attention to that. That's where the awareness comes in. Why are you getting your buttons pushed? What's making you feel this way? Because again, that external is the thing that's driving you. Don't get into that reaction. Choose to respond. That is something that you want to work on developing and practice. Sometimes you're not going to get it right, and it's okay. It's okay. Perfection doesn't exist. We're going to get it wrong. We apologize. We make up for it. We're doing the best that we can. And so give yourself grace and compassion. There have been many times I have lost my handle, and you know what? Hey, sometimes that emotion needed to get out that way. May not have been the best way, but sometimes it needed to get out that way. So de-escalating includes being aware of how your emotions are rising, if it's rising with overexcitement or too much anger. Anger is not a bad thing. It's information. It tells us that something's going on in our body. Something happened. And so we have to pay attention to that and ask ourselves, what is this information trying to tell me? When our computer is working and we got that little battery sign that says you got 2% left, that's information. So what are you going to do with it? You're going to keep pushing and let me just finish what I got to do. And then it may cut off and then you got to start all over. Or when you get that information, you see that little warning sign, are you going to go get your charger and plug it on in? It's the same thing with our body. You get warning signals. So you start to feel something. Maybe you're starting to feel like, ooh, what just happened? I feel really inadequate here. I feel like I don't know what they're talking about. They're using all these terms and terminology and acronyms. Like what's happening? What's that data in my body? Or what, I'm getting angry. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling attacked or threatened. What's going on here? So paying attention to that.
I like that. I definitely do notice there's sometimes when I'm usually watching people communicate and sometimes they'll escalate, so I'll kind of just sit there and watch. And I do notice people do have some kind of tendency to like certain cues will show that they're like the person that's being aggressive, I guess, will show some signs that they're getting a little irritated too. It's like, oh, there it goes. So then they start arguing, and then this guy starts to argue more, and they're arguing more. It's like, oh, great, there you go. There is conversation.
Yeah.
What are what's a key takeaway you've gotten from being a leader?
Well, the biggest thing is emotions are contagious. That's one of the biggest things. And so people can respond. We can change the energy in the rooms where we go based on how we're feeling. And so when we are in a leadership role, we have to be very honest with ourselves about where we are and what we're feeling and how significant of an impact our influence is. Even if we try super hard to let others know, like, hey, I'm on your level. You can give me feedback. By the nature of being a leader that people look up to, admire, respect, or follow, everything that you do is magnified. And people aren't always that forgiving because they see you in that role and they think that you should be perfect. Oh, he's a leadership coach and he's acting like that. Oh, she's a speaking coach and that happened. So people expect a lot of perfection. And so as a leader, you have to realize that you're in a big space of influence and you can give people permission to be themselves based on how you choose to show up. That's one of the biggest things that I've learned. If I only put out things about perfection, if I only talk to you on this show about how I've gotten everything right and figured it out, I do everybody who looks up to me a disservice because they see that and they say, I want to be like that. How come I can't master my emotions like that? How come I can't, like, what's wrong with me? I'm still trying to get better, not realizing that that thing that they're aspiring to is not real. It's fake. It's fictitious. But as a leader, I get to choose to show all sides that, yeah, I've lost it. I'm an emotional intelligence coach. Yeah, you give yourself some grace. You don't demonstrate perfection or try to demonstrate perfection because those that are watching are going to be aspiring to something that's not real, and that's really, really hurtful and harmful in my opinion.
Oh, I like that. It's really interesting. I never thought about it that way. What's your favorite leadership book?
The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. Turn my life around. Just turn my life around. The Success Principles. I read it over and over.
I'll definitely check that out. I haven't heard of it, but I will now.
Yeah, it's a really good book.
What kind of leadership topics do they talk about in there? Or generally?
Well, a lot of it is mindset. It's mindset. It's making sure that you're taking ownership and responsibility for your life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first got it and I started reading it, my mom and I read it together. Actually, we were doing this like daily thing, and I would read a portion and it would be so powerful. And I would be like, oh my God, you gotta listen to this. You gotta listen to this. and we would talk about the topic, and it's just a good book. It's a really good book, and it inspired my mom so much that she became a certified trainer in the Success Principles. So
yeah. Oh, yeah, your mom's a coach too?
Well, she is a certified coach, but she's been an educator for all of her life. So she's really been coaching from the beginning, if you will. Yeah. Not officially like what we say, but she's been a different type of coach, a teacher's coach and a student coach.
That's interesting. It's in your blood.
It is. I tell you, it's in DNA.
And that's the most important question. Where can our audience learn more about who you are and what you do? And how can they reach out to you?
You can definitely Google me, Monique Russell, Clear Communication Coach. You can visit any of my websites, clearcommunicationsolutions.com or moniquerussell.com. Moniquerussell.com is more vibrant. Clear Communication Solutions is the corporate facing company site. Or you can reach me on LinkedIn. Send me an invite and let us know that you heard this show and you were blessed by it. I'd love to connect with your audience.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and put the links in the comments, and then well, I've definitely learned a lot, Monique. I'm really looking forward to looking at the recording because I can definitely improve my communication and definitely all those tips you gave today.
You are so welcome. I love talking about this stuff. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Well, thank you, audience, for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Bye.